Beneath a blood-red Arizona sky in 1884, Marta Callahan, a widowed mother, clings to a crumbling ranch, her children's hungry eyes her only strength. Dust Hollow's merciless winds carry secrets, none darker than the dying stranger her son finds bleeding in the desert. Saving him sparks a journey that unearths buried truths and forges an unbreakable bond. Will their courage rewrite a legacy stained by betrayal, or will the desert claim them all? A tale of grit, love, and redemption awaits. Subscribe now, share where you're listening from, and uncover why one choice can bloom where hope seemed lost. Don't miss the truth waiting at the end. Dust Hollow, Arizona, 1884, lay forgotten under a sky scorched to bone. The sun hammered the cracked earth, where mesquite skeletons clawed at the air, and the wind howled like a grieving widow. Marta Callahan stood on the warped porch of her sagging ranch house, her gaunt frame silhouetted against the horizon. Her gray eyes, sharp as flint, scanned the barren yard where a rusted horseshoe spun in the grit. The well had gone dry a week ago, the corn withered to stalks, and the hens mocked her with their silence. Liam, her 10-year-old son, poked at the dirt with a stick, while Ayla, the Apache girl her late husband had saved, mended a torn skirt in the shade. Marta's hands tightened on the porch rail. This was all they had left, a patch of dust and a stubborn will to hold it. The air thickened with a strange coppery tang as noon bled into afternoon. A storm was brewing, not of rain, but of red sand, rising like a tide from the Dragoon Mountains. Marta felt it in her bones, the way the desert whispered trouble before it struck. She called to Liam, her voice cutting through the heat. "Stay close, boy. Wind's turning mean." He nodded, freckles stark against his sunburned face, but his eyes strayed toward the gulch beyond the barn. Ayla glanced up, her dark braid swinging, sensing the shift too. The girl had a knack for reading the land, like it spoke to her in a tongue Marta couldn't hear. By dusk, the storm hit, a snarling beast of dust and fury. Sand stung like buckshot, clawing at the cabin's walls. Marta latched the shutters, her fingers raw from wrestling warped wood. Liam burst through the door, coughing, his shirt flapping like a tattered flag. "Ma, I found something!" he gasped, thrusting out a small, silver cartridge casing, etched with a starburst near the primer. It gleamed, too fine for Dust Hollow's rusted rifles. Marta turned it over, her thumb tracing the polished brass. "This ain't ours," she said, voice low. "Where'd you find it?" "Near Split Rock," Liam said, breathless, "under a greasewood bush. Saw tracks too, limping, like someone's hurt. Not fresh, maybe, last night." Marta's gaze flicked to the gulch, where shadows curled like smoke among red cliffs. Trouble didn't just pass through Dust Hollow, it lingered. She tucked the casing into her apron pocket. "Don't tell Ayla yet," she warned. Liam nodded, used to keeping secrets in a place where loose talk could cost you everything. That afternoon, Morgan Pike rode in, his black stallion kicking up dust like a warning. The so-called investor, with his silk vest and snake oil smile, was no minor. Word was he smuggled guns across the border. He dismounted with a predator's ease, his boots crunching the earth. "Marta," he drawled, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "You're 2 weeks late on rent. I got buyers itching for this land, mining men with deep pockets." His eyes, cold as a rattler's, fixed on her. 10 days, or you're gone." Marta didn't flinch. "I'll find a way," she said, her voice steady as iron. Pike smirked, spitting into the dirt. "You're betting on miracles, woman? This ain't the place for 'em." He rode off, leaving a trail of dust and dread. Ayla stepped onto the porch, her dark eyes narrowing. "He wants the land for his guns," she whispered. Marta nodded, her jaw tight. The girl was sharp, too sharp for her 12 years. Night fell, and the storm roared louder, rattling the tin roof like gunfire. Marta was banking the fire when Liam's shout pierced the howl. "Ma! Out by the gulch!" She grabbed her rifle and scarf, heart pounding, and followed him into the maelstrom. The wind blinded her, sand biting her cheeks, but Liam's small figure led the way to Split Rock. There, half buried in a drift of red sand, lay a man, face down, blood pooling beneath him. His shirt, once fine, was torn and crimson, a bullet hole gaping below his shoulder. A silver spur gleamed on his boot, and a leather belt, studded with black pearls, marked him as no ordinary drifter. Marta knelt, checking his pulse, weak, but there. "Help me, Liam," she said, voice taut. The boy hesitated, then grabbed the man's legs. They dragged him to the old wagon behind the barn, its axle creaking under the weight. Ayla waited at the door, eyes wide. "Is he dead?" she asked. "Not yet," Marta replied, hauling him inside. As she settled him on a cot, a blood-stained paper slipped from his coat. She unfolded it, squinting at smeared ink. Santa Fe. Diary. Gideon Pike. Her heart skipped. Saving this man meant inviting his enemies to her door. But as she looked at Liam and Ayla, their faces lit by flickering lamplight, she knew she couldn't leave him to the desert's mercy. Trouble had found them, and it carried a truth too heavy to ignore. The lamplight flickered across the stranger's face, casting shadows that danced like ghosts on the cabin's rough walls. Marta sat by the cot, her hand steady as she pressed a cloth soaked in boiled yarrow against the man's bullet wound. The air smelled of vinegar and blood, sharp enough to cut through the desert's lingering dust. Liam slept fitfully in the corner, curled under a patched quilt, while Ayla knelt nearby, grinding herbs with a pestle, her dark eyes fixed on the stranger. Outside, the storm had faded to a low growl, leaving Dust Hollow draped in an uneasy quiet. Marta's fingers paused as the man stirred, his breath hitching like a broken bellows. His eyes, dark and fevered, flickered open, locking onto hers. "Don't move," she said, voice low but firm, like iron cooled in the forge. "You're patched up, but you ain't out of the grave yet." He tried to speak, his cracked lips forming words that crumbled into a cough. Ayla passed a tin cup of water, and Marta held it to his mouth. He drank slowly, each sip a battle. The blood-stained paper, still folded on the table, seemed to hum with secrets, its ink whispering. Santa Fe. Diary. Gideon Pike. Marta hadn't shown it to the children, but Ayla's sharp gaze had caught its shadow. The girl knew something was brewing, same as the coyotes knew a storm before it broke. By dawn, the man's fever held, but his eyes cleared enough to hold a thought. "Name's Jonas Hale," he rasped, voice like gravel under a boot. "I owe you." Marta didn't answer, just swapped the cloth for a fresh one, the wound oozing but clean. "You owe me nothing till you're breathing steady," she said. "Who put that hole in you?" Jonas's jaw tightened, and he looked away, toward the warped boards of the ceiling. "Someone who don't want me in Santa Fe," he muttered. "Someone with a long reach." Before Marta could press, hooves thundered outside, sharp and deliberate. She grabbed her derringer, tucking it into her apron, and signaled Ayla to hide Jonas under a pile of feed sacks in the corner. Liam woke, eyes wide, but stayed silent as Marta stepped onto the porch. 3 riders, bandanas pulled high, sat astride lean horses, their rifles glinting in the morning haze. The leader, a wiry man with a scar slicing his brow, tipped his hat. "Mornin', ma'am," he said, voice slick as oil. "We're hunting a man. Shot up, maybe passed this way. Seen anything?" Marta's face was stone. "Ain't seen no one but dust and buzzards," she said. The leader's eyes narrowed, scanning the yard, lingering on the wagon's fresh tracks. "Place like this, you'd notice a stranger," he pressed. "Morgan Pike don't take kindly to folks hiding what's his." Marta's grip on the derringer tightened, hidden in her pocket. "Pike don't own me or my land," she said. "Ride on." The leader smirked, but the second rider, a hulking figure with a limp, circled the barn, his boots kicking up clouds of red grit. Ayla, crouched inside, held her breath as his shadow passed the slats. He paused, then spat and turned back. "Just a dried-up ranch," he grunted. The riders left, their dust curling like a warning into the canyon. Inside, Marta pulled Jonas from the sacks, his face pale but alert. "Talk," she said, tossing the blood-stained paper onto his chest. "Who's Gideon Pike, and why's his name tied to you bleeding on my floor?" Jonas unfolded the paper, his hands trembling. "Gideon's Morgan's brother," he said. "They run guns, land, anything that pays. My mother, she knew too much, tried to get me out before they silenced her." His voice cracked, not with tears, but with old rage. "I was 16 when she died. They called it fever, but I saw her eyes that last night, scared, not sick. She left this note, said a diary in Santa Fe holds proof they killed her to steal my father's railroad fortune." Marta leaned back, the chair creaking under her. "Your father's Silas Hale," she said, piecing it together. "The railroad man." Jonas nodded. "I walked away from his money years ago. Hired out as a gun, ran with rough men. Blood on my hands ain't clean, Marta. I don't deserve saving." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Out here, deserving's got nothing to do with it. It's about what you do today." Her words hung heavy, like the smoke of a dying fire. Ayla stepped forward, holding a small woven charm, an Apache token her mother had taught her to make. "For protection," she said, placing it beside Jonas. He touched it, his fingers lingering. "My mother used to weave," he murmured. "Not like this, but it feels familiar." Liam, watching from the corner, clutched his knife, wary but curious. Marta stood, the paper in her hand. "If you're telling the truth, we're all in deep now. Pike's men'll be back." Jonas nodded, wincing as he shifted. "I need to get to Santa Fe. That diary, it's all I got left of her." Marta looked at her children, then back at him. "Then we move fast," she said. The desert didn't forgive hesitation, and neither would she. The wagon creaked under the weight of their meager supplies, its wheels grinding through the red sand as Marta snapped the reins. Dawn broke over Dust Hollow, painting the Dragoon Mountains in shades of fire and ash. Jonas, still pale, sat beside her, his bandaged chest rising with shallow breaths. Liam and Ayla huddled in the back, their eyes fixed on the shrinking cliffs of home. The air was thick with the scent of creosote and heat, the Sonoran desert stretching before them like a sea of bone. Santa Fe lay days away, and Pike's men weren't far behind. Marta's hands tightened on the leather straps. They'd chosen the fight, and the desert would test their grit. The sun climbed, relentless, turning the horizon into a shimmering lie. Barrel cacti stood like sentinels, their spines glinting in the light. Flies buzzed, drawn to the sweat on their necks. Jonas pointed east, his voice rough but steady. "Coyote draws our best shot. Narrow, but it'll keep us off the main trails." Marta nodded, steering the mules toward a jagged cut in the earth. The path was a gamble, sheltered but tight, a perfect spot for an ambush. Ayla scanned the ridges, her fingers tracing the woven charm she'd given Jonas, as if it could ward off more than bad spirits. By noon, the heat pressed like a branding iron. Liam, usually chatter-prone, grew quiet, his face flushed beneath his hat. Marta noticed his slumped shoulders and pulled the wagon to a halt under a lone mesquite. "Drink," she ordered, passing him a canteen. He took a sip, then coughed, his hands trembling. She touched his forehead, hot as a skillet. "Fever," she said, her voice betraying a crack of fear. Jonas slid down, wincing, and knelt beside the boy. "Could be bad water, or the trail's heat," he said, digging through his saddlebag. He pulled out strips of willow bark and dried yarrow. "Boil this. Slow sips'll bring him down." Marta built a small fire, the smoke curling like a warning to the sky. As the herbs steeped, Liam's eyes fluttered, his breath ragged. Ayla sat close, whispering Apache words her mother had taught her, a soft chant against the desert's cruelty. Jonas watched, his face unreadable. "My mother used to sing to me when I was sick," he said quietly. "Kept the dark at bay." Marta met his gaze, then turned back to Liam, forcing the bitter tea past his lips. Hours passed, the sun dipping low, and the boy's fever held, stubborn as the land itself. Night fell, cold and sharp, the stars like bullet holes in a black canvas. They camped beneath a rock overhang, its shadow offering scant cover. Marta kept watch, her shotgun across her lap, the weight of Pike's threat heavy in her mind. If you're out there, listener, riding along with us through this tale, hit that subscribe button. It's like tossing a coin to a storyteller by the fire, keeping the story alive. Share where you're from. We're all kin in the desert's shadow. The night was too quiet, the kind that hid trouble. A rustle broke the silence, boots on gravel, too heavy for a jackrabbit. Marta's grip tightened as shapes moved in the dark. 3 figures emerged, rifles glinting under the moon. "Hand over the man," one growled, his voice thick with border dust. Marta stood, shotgun raised, but before she could speak, a shot rang out, grazing her arm. Pain seared, but she held firm. Jonas moved, his Colt flashing from his coat, but he froze as Ayla darted forward. "This way," she hissed, pulling them toward a narrow gully. Her memory of Apache trails, sharp as a blade, led them through a maze of rock and thorn. The thieves fired wildly, bullets chipping stone, but Ayla's path twisted beyond their aim. They stumbled into a dry arroyo, hearts pounding, the sounds of pursuit fading. Marta's arm bled, a shallow wound, but she ignored it, checking Liam. His fever was breaking, his breath steadier. Jonas reloaded his Colt, his face grim. "They're Pike's dogs," he said. "Won't stop till I'm dead." Marta's eyes burned. "Then we don't stop neither." Ayla, panting, pointed to a faint trail snaking toward the horizon. "Red Hollow's close," she said. "My people used it to hide. It'll take us to Santa Fe." Marta nodded, her respect for the girl deepening. The desert had tested them, but Ayla's courage was their compass. As dawn broke, painting the sky blood red, they climbed back into the wagon, the mules snorting against the cold. Santa Fe was closer, but so was danger, and the diary's truth waited like a loaded gun. The wagon rolled out of Red Hollow under a sky bruised purple, the air sharp with pine and the faint tang of gunpowder. Santa Fe shimmered ahead, its adobe walls glowing like embers in the desert heat. Marta's arm throbbed beneath its bandage, but her grip on the reins was steady, her eyes fixed on the city's crooked streets. Jonas sat beside her, his Colt holstered but close, the weight of the diary's promise heavy in his coat. Liam, pale but recovering, leaned against Ayla in the wagon bed, her woven charm dangling from his wrist. The trail had forged them into something harder than strangers, tougher than kin. Santa Fe held answers, but answers in the West came with a price. The city buzzed with life, vendors hawking chilies, hammers ringing on new timber, and the low hum of saloon pianos. Dust clung to everything, coating boots and dreams alike. Jonas led them to the south end, where the houses thinned and the air smelled of varnish and creosote. A lean-to shack, patched with rusted nails, stood alone amid mesquite fences. "Ellison Crane," Jonas said, nodding toward the shack. "Used to be a preacher, then a lawyer. Now he's just an old man with a diary." Marta's jaw tightened. Old men with secrets were as dangerous as young ones with guns. They knocked, the door creaking under Jonas's fist. A voice, rough as gravel, answered. "Boots better be clean. Words better be true," Jonas replied. "We're walking, not riding." The door opened, revealing Ellison Crane, hunched, one eye milky, the other sharp as a hawk's. A scar curled from brow to jaw, and his hands, steady as a gunslinger's, clutched a half-carved chair leg. "Jonas Hale," he muttered, tossing the knife into a pile of shavings. "Thought you were buzzard food by now." Jonas didn't smile. "Someone tried. I need the diary, Ellison. My mother's." Crane limped to a cabinet, its 3 locks rusted but solid. "Your mama Clara knew she was marked," he said, working the keys. "Left this with me when she passed through in '69. Said if her boy came, I'd know him by his eyes." He pulled out a leather-bound diary, its edges cracked but pages intact. Jonas took it, his fingers tracing the faded ink of his mother's hand. Crane's good eye narrowed. "It's a fuse to a powder keg. Lists every deal Gideon Pike and his brother made. Land grabs, gun runs, and the night they silenced Clara to keep Silas Hale's fortune." Marta stepped closer, her shotgun slung low. "Silas Hale's in town," she said, voice steady. "Word is he's backing the Pikes." Crane snorted. "Silas is a coward, not a killer. He turned a blind eye when Clara died. Let the Pikes rewrite his legacy." Jonas's face hardened. "Then he'll face her words in court." Crane pointed to a notice pinned on the wall, a temporary hearing set for dusk at the courthouse. "You've got hours, not days," he warned. "Pike's men are circling like vultures." The courthouse was a squat brick building, its walls stained by years of dust and gun smoke. Inside, the air was thick with sweat and tension. Silas Hale sat at the plaintiff's bench, his silver hair neat, his hands trembling on a cane. Once a titan of railroads, he now looked brittle, his eyes cold, but haunted. Morgan and Gideon Pike stood nearby, their silk vests gleaming, their smiles sharp as knives. The judge, a weathered man named Amos Vane, rapped his gavel. "State your business," he barked, as Jonas stepped forward, diary in hand. "This proves my mother, Clara Hale, was murdered," Jonas said, voice like steel. "Gideon Pike killed her to steal my father's empire." The crowd murmured, and Silas's face paled. Morgan Pike laughed, a hollow sound. "That boy's a liar, dead years ago. I signed his papers myself." Jonas opened the diary, holding up pages of Clara's tight script, dates, deals, and a final entry. "If I'm gone, Gideon planned it. Protect Jonas." The judge's brow furrowed, but Silas shook his head. "Forgeries," he whispered. "My Clara's gone." Ayla stepped forward, small but fierce, clutching a page torn from the diary. "This is her song," she said, her voice clear as a bell. She read aloud a lullaby, words of stars and cedar, known only to the Hale family. Silas froze, his eyes welling. "She sang that to you," he choked, looking at Jonas. "My boy." The crowd went silent. Gideon lunged, shouting, "Lies!" But marshals grabbed him. Morgan tried to bolt, but Jonas's Colt flashed, a warning shot cracking the air. The judge slammed his gavel. "Morgan and Gideon Pike, you're under arrest for murder and fraud." Silas slumped, tears falling. "I failed her," he said to Jonas. "And you?" Jonas didn't soften. "You chose silence. I choose truth." He turned to Marta, Liam, and Ayla, their faces steady in the lamplight. The diary had cracked the Pike's empire, but it was Ayla's voice that broke Silas's denial. As the marshals dragged the pikes away, Marta's hand brushed Jonas's arm. Santa Fe had given them justice, but the desert still waited, and their fight wasn't over yet. The desert stretched wide and quiet as the wagon rolled back into Dust Hollow, its wheels carving fresh scars in the red earth. Marta's shoulders squared against the familiar horizon, where the Dragoon Mountains loomed like old sentinels, weathered but unyielding. Jonas sat beside her, his wounds scarred over, his colt now buried beneath a floorboard back in Santa Fe. Liam and Ayla leaned out from the wagon bed, their faces dusted but bright, the weight of justice settling like ash after a fire. The courthouse had stripped the Pikes of their power, but it was this land, parched and stubborn, that called them home. Marta's heart beat steady. They'd won a battle, but building a life was the harder fight. The cabin stood as they'd left it, sagging but defiant, its tin roof glinting under a late spring sun. The well was dry, the garden a tangle of dead stalks, but the air felt different, lighter, as if the wind had tired of its hunger. Jonas jumped down, his boots kicking up dust, and surveyed the land. "We'll make it right," he said, voice rough but sure. Marta nodded, her hands already itching for a shovel. Liam ran to the barn, checking for forgotten tools, while Ayla knelt by the gate, tracing patterns in the dirt. "This is ours now," she said, her voice soft but fierce, like the desert itself. They started small, hauling stones to mark a new fence line. Jonas traded a silver spur, his last tie to the Hale name, for a sack of corn seed and a pair of mules in town. Marta dug the well deeper, her arms burning as she broke through clay to a trickle of water, clear and cold as truth. Liam learned to swing a hammer, his small hands nailing boards to patch the barn's gaps. Ayla planted wild sage along the path, her fingers deft as she whispered Apache blessings into the soil. The land fought back, sand clogged their tools, and a sudden hailstorm battered the roof, but they pushed on, calluses forming where hope had faltered. One evening, as the sky burned gold, Jonas sat with Liam under a mesquite, teaching him to carve a whistle from a dried branch. "Hold the knife steady," he said, guiding the boy's hand. "Let the wood tell you its shape." Liam's eyes lit up as the first note sang, sharp and clear. Ayla watched from the porch, weaving a new dream catcher, its feathers catching the breeze. Marta joined her, wiping sweat from her brow. "He's good with them," she said, nodding toward Jonas. Ayla's lips curved. "He's good with us." The words hung, simple but heavy, like a stone smoothed by a river. Days bled into weeks, and the ranch took shape. The well flowed stronger, feeding rows of sprouting beans. The hens, coaxed with fresh feed, began laying again. Ayla painted a sign in careful, crooked letters. Callahan Springs Ranch. She hung her mother's dream catcher beside it, its beads glinting like stars against the wood. Jonas, one quiet dawn, dug a hole near the gate and buried his silver-handled Colt, the metal cold against his palm. "No more blood," he said to Marta, who stood watching. She nodded, her eyes tracing the man he'd become, scarred, steady, and hers. One night, under a full moon's glow, Jonas led Marta to the porch, his hands rough but gentle as he pulled a small leather pouch from his coat. Inside was a thin silver chain, a single turquoise stone dangling from it. "My mother's," he said, voice low. "She wore it when she was happy. Said it held the sky's truth." He fastened it around Marta's neck, his fingers lingering. "Marry me, Marta. Let's raise this land, these kids, together." Liam, eavesdropping from the window, grinned wide, and Ayla clutched a bundle of sage, whispering, "Say it, Ma." Marta's throat tightened, but her voice was clear. "Yes, The wedding was no grand affair, just them, the wind, and a sage-wrapped arbor by the gate. Liam gave Jonas a ring, a flattened nickel from a Tucson rail, its edges worn smooth. Ayla scattered wildflower petals, her laughter mingling with the desert's hum. They spoke vows not to a preacher, but to the land, promising to hold it as fiercely as they held each other. Liam and Ayla stepped forward after, their faces solemn. "We want your name," Liam said, "but we keep Callahan too." "For Pa." Jonas knelt, his eyes bright. "You're Callahan Hales now. Mine, always." By summer, morning glories bloomed along the fence, blue and fierce, curling toward the sun. The ranch wasn't rich, but it was alive. Fences sturdy, fields green, and a family forged not by blood, but by choices made in the dust. Jonas stood on the porch one dawn, coffee steaming in his hand, watching Marta tend the garden. The sign creaked. Callahan Springs Ranch. The desert had tried to break them, but they'd built something stronger. A home where truth took root and love grew wild. The dust of Callahan Springs Ranch settles, but its tale of grit and chosen family lingers. Marta, Jonas, Liam, and Ayla carved a home from the desert's heart, proving truth and love can bloom where hope seemed lost. What struck you most? Their courage, their bonds, or the land's redemption? Share your thoughts below. Your voice keeps these stories alive. Gratitude to you for riding this trail with us through every storm and sunrise. Stay close to the fire, partner. Another tale's brewing in the desert wind. We'll meet again when the next story calls, under a sky as wide as the west.